distinguished guests, and fellow environmental enthusiasts, a very warm welcome to the Pune International Center. My name is Sanaka Potnis, and I work as a policy researcher in the Energy, Environment and Climate Change Research Program at the Pune International Center. I'll be your MC for this evening. We're delighted to have you with us for the much-awaited celebration of the World Environment Day 2024. Internationally, the United Nations has designated 5th June as the World Environment Day in an effort to engage in discussion and act towards protecting and restoring the Earth. Allow me to now provide you with a brief overview of the Pune International Center. We're an independent think tank with 5 verticals deliberating on issues of national significance and influencing policy making in India. These verticals are energy, environment and climate change, international relations, social innovation, technology and national innovation ecosystem, urbanization and economic reforms, and national security. We uphold the values of the Indian Constitution and the UN Charter, and organize roundtable discussions, international conferences, and book discussions to foster open dialogues and debates. Every year, the Energy, Environment, and Climate Change Research Program celebrates this day, the World Environment Day, with the aim to deepen environmental awareness and inspire collective action. Over the past few years, we have deliberated on issues ranging from green career opportunities, youth manifesto for a climate secure future, green development, and our flagship project of making PMR net carbon neutral by 2030. This is just to name a few. Today, we have gathered to mark a very significant milestone in the journey of Pune International Center. We are launching our first self-published book titled Sustainable and Climate Resilient Development for India, edited by Professor Amitav Malik, founding member and trustee of Pune International Center and head of our research vertical. This book is very important because it comes at a very crucial moment for India's developmental trajectory. As we speak, the country is looming under a climate crisis. Just last week, we have seen record-breaking temperatures, heat waves in various parts of the country, and closer home in Pune city itself, we are experiencing unseasonal rainfall, just what we saw some time back today. These extreme weather events have now become a part of our everyday lives, and with a developing country like India with 1.4 billion people, being climate resilient and looking at strategies that will help safeguard us in the future becomes very important. So it is in this context that the book encapsulates the perspectives from 9 contributing authors. We're very happy that we have 6 authors present with us today in the audience, and we'll be speaking with them shortly. To put forth a few ideas about what the book very briefly discusses. So there's a new acceptance that has come through this book, through the writings of all the authors, that economic progress and caring for the planet can go hand in hand and must go hand in hand. And it is dedicated to the youth of India and world over. The core message of the book is that net zero is not the complete story. The idea of preserving ecosystem and conserving the carbon balance of the earth is the other part of the story, which our authors have highlighted. It's also the year that the UN has designated as the decade of restoration. So this book actually comes at a very interesting point of time because we're looking at strategies, technologies, ethics, governance frameworks, and mindset changes that are needed to restore this carbon balance in the earth. Without further ado, I would like to now call on stage the chair for today's book launch, Dr. Raghunath Mashelkar, our guest of honor, Dr. Ajit Ranade, and the convener of the book launch, Professor Amitav Malik. quickly introduce, they don't need any introduction, but I'll make a very short introduction. Dr. Raghunath Mashekar is the president of Pune International Center and former director general of the Council of Scientific and Industrial Research. He's a renowned figure in India's scientific and industrial landscape, and he has played a pivotal role in shaping the country's largest research and development organization. His illustrious career has earned him recognition such as the prestigious Bhatnagar Award, the JRD Tata Corporate Leaders Award, and he is a fellow of the Royal Society in the UK. He serves on several corporate boards promoting innovation and research, and he holds the notable distinction of receiving honorary doctorates from 48 universities globally. He received the Padma Shri. He received the Padma Shri in 1991, Padma Bhushan in 2000, and Padma Vibhushan in 2014. And his commitment to fostering research and development, coupled with his visionary leadership, has left a very significant mark on India's scientific landscape. I welcome you, sir. I would like to introduce our special guest for the event, Dr. Ajit Ranade. He's the Vice Chancellor of Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics, Pune, and a trustee at the Pune International Center. He was Group Executive President and Chief Economist at the Aditya Birla Group, and an Indian multinational conglomerate. He's the chair of the Research Advisory Panel for Indian Institute of Banking and Finance, governing council member of the Center of Advanced Finance Research and Learning, and a member of the Academic Council of the Meghnad Desai Academy of Economics. With a BTech in Electrical Engineering from IIT Bombay and PGDM from the Indian Institute of Management, Ahmedabad, he is the co-founder and trustee of the Association of Democratic Reforms. I welcome you, sir. Now I'd like to introduce you to the convener of the book launch, Professor Amitav Malik. He heads the program on energy, environment, and climate change at PIC. He's an expert on high-power laser technology. He has served as a diplomat and advisor in defense technology in the Indian Embassy in Washington for 6 years. And on his return to India, he pioneered in the work of high-power laser, contributing to India's laser weapon capabilities for satellite defense. He was awarded the Padma Shri in 2002 and later served on the National Security Advisory Board for 3 years. He has authored books on strategic technologies, energy security, before he diverted all his focus to energy, environment, and climate change. And he has pioneered all the major flagship projects under this research vertical. So he has helped with path-breaking reports on how Pune metropolitan region can become net carbon neutral. And he focuses on local solutions for climate action, which can then be also replicated in other big cities like Pune. This book is a brainchild of his, and I welcome you, sir, and I request you to please address the audience and share with us your ideas behind the book.
Dr. Mashekar, Dr. Ranade, and my friends, I think almost all are familiar faces. Sanika has done such a wonderful job, I really don't need to speak. And yet, as a climate enthusiast, as a climate activist, I must say a few words. The evening today is not for book launch. The evening today is for celebrating World Environment Day. I think it started around 1972. The first Earth Summit as such was in Stockholm, Sweden. Since then, this has been observed every year by the United Nations organization. What is interesting is that there was enough awareness among scientists and thinkers way back in 72 that what we are doing is going to take us to major troubles. Looking back, the first COP, Cooperation of Parties, was in 1991-92, Kyoto. And since then, the number says we were 27, 28 international conferences. And yet, today if we look back, if we look at things that are happening, they are happening because we are not really caring. We means the humanity, the politicians, the industrials, and everybody. So it kind of raises a question in my mind that we are all supposed to be a very evolved species, the human being. We are so well equipped in analysis, thinking, planning, etc. And yet we are not doing something about our own doom, which is looming very fast. So are we really planning for failure? So this is the thought that comes to me, and someday I'll end up writing on it. Unfortunately, the inertia in the society, in the political circle, in the commercial and industrial circles, everybody is chasing GDP. GDP was evolved around 1935-37, before the Second World War. And it was that very proper at that point of time because economic progress was a challenge. But then GDP does not even talk about anything other than the amount of financial transaction. GDP goes up even when there is a disaster. GDP goes up even when there is a war. So obviously what we are not measuring will never get attention. So in our group we are working hard to evolve a green GDP, and this will be this year's focus, to see how our economics planners and political leadership can at least start worrying about something else other than GDP, or measure what is relevant in terms of our future. The second point I would like to say, on a day like this 2 years ago, we launched a youth program, Agenda for Youth. And there the youth threw open a challenge to the political leadership, the industrial leadership, and so on and so forth, people who are influential, people who can make a difference. The youth presented their case because it is their future which is at stake. And we thought it will make an impact on the forthcoming election which just got over. Maybe there was some kind of a mention of climate change, global warming in some manifesto, major two manifesto. No discussion at all through the bill. So it worries me that something which is very real, something which is very imminent, and something which is growing invisibly, nothing is happening. So climate action, I think somewhere I have said, it's high time we give it a due thought. Having said that, the book that I thought about putting together, the Sustainable and Climate Resilient Development, is oriented to actually what must happen in future. Obviously, the pathway that we have followed has led us to this situation where the use of fossil fuel for energy and development and progress and evolution, energy is absolutely must. And there was not that kind of alternative earlier, and therefore there was not enough discussion on how to reduce the carbon signature or carbon footprint of everything that we do, all our activities. But today the situation has changed. Today the renewable energy, which is essentially clean, has become competitive. And unless we pick up this momentum for increasing the renewable energy content in our overall basket, things will not start changing. Of course, the most powerful lobby in the world is the fossil fuel lobby, oil lobby. They are still trying their best to say, you are going to need us till mid-century. You cannot do without us. I would like to announce today, wish today, that I hope by 2030, the momentum of climate change, momentum of decarbonization, momentum of preserving the environment, caring for the environment, I hope these things really pick up speed. And once it comes, then it's very contagious. Hopefully, by 2030, which the UN had described as the final deciding decade, which will determine what the entire century may be. So we have only 6 years left. And in those 6 years, many things will happen. So on a day like today, wish from my heart that we will see major transformational changes for the humanity. We are not saving the earth. Earth is very, very well taken care of. You leave the earth alone and it will bounce back to what it was. We have to stop harming the earth. We have to stop spoiling the environment. We have to stop planning for failure. We have to plan for success. We are saying economic success, etc., but we are actually planning for failure. And that is what bothers me today most. And in that spirit, I have put this together. I must remember initial discussion with Dr. Kelkar, how he, being an economist, and I'm a hardcore environmentalist now, we had many discussions, many arguments, and the book has come through that kind of discussion and challenges, defining what can be done, what must be done, what should happen. And so unfortunately, Dr. Kelkar is not in Pune today. He is with his daughter in Bangalore. But I cannot go forward without remembering his monumental help and advice. Again, I will not go by the script as such, but the theme of the book actually is about the sustainable and climate resilient development is about a paradigm shift into a new age, a new era of what we call climate challenge world. So everything that we have been doing so far, including changing the GDP, even that will have to change. Business as usual will not do. So we are at the epoch of a major transformational change in the society, in the economy, and of course, all that cannot happen without caring for environment. The other change which Sanika mentioned, my generation at least has grown up with the perception that the economy and environmental focus have something intrinsically conflicting. And actually it is not that, and that has become amply clear. Not only that the renewable energies have become more competitive than oil and coal, but no matter what you do with oil and coal, you will go on harming the environment and earth. And that is something that we cannot allow. So that's a new paradigm that I'm saying. whatever we do, every human activity today or till today has been emitting carbon dioxide, greenhouse gases. We cannot suddenly change overnight. World over, the awareness about what's happening. When I started this program 6 years ago, it was just about 30-35%. Today it is at 75-80%. So awareness is increased, and yet climate action is not yet happening. So I hope this book will bring into focus what all can be done. Yeah. So can we go to the list of the chapters? So the 11 chapters you will see are not about climate change per se. Sir, we have 2 minutes here. So first one, I thought I'll introduce the book with redefining climate resilient human development. So the human development definition has got to change. Business as usual will not do. Incremental change also will not do. Second chapter is from my friend Dr. Gurudas Nulkar. He is equally hard-headed as me about climate change and about environment. Or I should say the other way around. He always has been, and I am a defense technologist, got converted into this much later. So he is original thought leader in this area. Fortunately, we are not just friends. We are totally in line with each other and doing the same thing. So he is talking about sustainable growth for India. Another person in World Bank is Azad Ghani, who is an excellent writer, and he goes on analyzing and writing. So he offered contribution to this book, and he said why India needs to balance economic growth and climate action. He is not here today, so depending on the time, I'll present what his thoughts are. Then the transition to renewable energy and likely global scenario is by a very distinguished scholar, Ajay Shankar. And the transition to renewable energy, in a way, only addresses the emission. But then, even if we all achieve net carbon zero or carbon neutrality, as many people call it now, by 2050, which is the global objective, that is not the answer. That's only part of the answer. The other part is what my friend Aditi has brought out, the restoring ecosystem to drive sustainability. In fact, most of us forget and take it for granted that but for the rich ecosystem that the earth has provided to mankind, our development would not have happened. And that itself is getting damaged because of our activity. Of course, role of technology for going towards zero carbon economy is my friend Nitant Mate, once again a thought leader and an energy specialist. Building governance and institutionalized resilience is something that I thought should be addressed by one of our youngest colleagues. And Medha has done a wonderful job about it. Then, of course, a very important issue that bogs us all is the ethics of climate change. In fact, the way things have happened so far, the gap between the haves and have-nots actually has increased. Whereas I was hoping that climate change and climate action would be a levelizer. But it's yet to happen. And while all this was going on, my colleague and friend, Shalvi Pawar. She suddenly came out with the thought that the way things are happening is not the way, and this we have to pin it down and suggest what we can do. So she has written a chapter on essential approaches to sustainability, greening the gap. There is a big gap in what should happen and what is really happening. So she is with us today. She will speak about it. And of course, I shared my thoughts. Oh, I forgot Dr. Nulkar, Sustainable Green Growth of India. And that really is the words from the thought leader. So we are not against growth. We are not against economic progress. In fact, we are saying that must happen, but with a sustainable focus. At last, I shared my thoughts about changing Earth environment and future of mankind. Changing Earth environment is happening. We are all aware of it. Sanika said about the sudden rains. I am actually very heartened because in Pune, for my long stay in the city, 7th June has been the onset of monsoon. It came 2 days early. Unlike what is happening elsewhere, at least in the plains of the Sahyadri, things are happening ultimately, fortunately, almost as if by design. The other thing that struck me while writing this chapter and finishing the book is the role of every individual. Today, we have slowly followed the West. Our definition of progress is how rich you are. Our children are taught whatever you do, you must quickly go abroad and become rich as fast as possible. In the schools and colleges, nobody discusses climate change or the future, the real future. Therefore, there has to be a mindset change. What kind of mindset change? I started studying Adhyatma and Advaita Vedanta for quite a few years. Ultimate wisdom actually is that we are all part of this larger big, and we all have to care for each other and not compete the way we are seeing. The competition has become an ugly word. Competition should be a very encouraging, very energizing word. So I'm talking about the total change in social and individual perspective on what is the value system. Almost saying that it's time to move away from consumerism, it's time to move away from consumption, it's time to move away from counting richness by money and not richness by your value. I think I'll close here. I've taken quite a bit of time. What we plan to do is I'll request Dr. Gurdas to say a word about your chapter and your ideas, and then call the other 5-6 authors who are here, and we have given the in order of 2, 3, 4, 5. So fortunately, except for Ijaz Ghani and Ajay Shankar, who are not in Pune, I must mention another person who held this program but was the Teddy girl, Mathur, yeah. Ritu Mathur, yeah. She has made very rich and contribution to my chapters, my thinking, because we know each other for many years, and she is an excellent energy expert, and she has done wonderful modeling exercises. And like her, there are many friends who have contributed to this book in some way or other. I cannot mention all of them, but enough of my narrative. So I hand over to Sanika, and let's see how come. I'll probably come back again at the end to summarize. Thank you.
Thank you, sir, for a very enlightening discussion. You have taken us through the genesis of the global movement to cover all the themes that have been covered in the book. I would now like to call all the contributing authors, our dignitaries, and so now we'll do the book release. So I'd like to call all the contributing authors present with us here today: Dr. Gurudas Nulkar, Dr. Nitan Mate, Aditi Kare, Megha Phadke, Shalvi Pawar, and Dr. Priyadarshini Karve. I also request Director PIC Abhay Vaidya sir to please join us on the dais to launch the book. And Prashant sir, can you please join us on the dais? And I request Gurudas sir to please guide a discussion with the authors.
Thank you so much for changing it at the last moment to guide the discussions. It's easier to guide than to speak, so thank you. So what you see in front of you right now is a set of authors who have contributed to the book in sweat, blood, and research. So it's not just research, but in everything that they work together. And I think the most striking difference that you would see in any other book launch than today's is the average age of the panel, right? So many of these, the four authors are very young in nature, and they are actually the people who are going to face the effects of climate change in their lifetime, and therefore yeah, so we have two sets of people facing each other, the problem creators and the problem solvers. So thanks, Dr. Bhargav, for that. It's interesting that we have that. I would like to start with the youngest member of the team, Megha, and I would like Megha to open the discussion with a few words on what is it that struck you in the title which you have chosen for yourself, and what are the solutions that you suggest?
First of all, I feel extremely honored to sit in front of Mashekar sir and Ranade sir and to be able to talk about my thoughts and my ideas behind my writings. And all of this was only possible because of Amitav sir. He is why I am here, and I'm giving this opportunity so early in my career to pen down my thoughts. So thank you for that, sir. So I am a law student at ILS Law College. And I joined PIC 1 year back, and now I don't work there, but I worked there for more than a year. And my work was basically in climate policy. So the genesis of my thoughts behind my chapter and behind this book actually stem from my law journey, because I saw two completely different worlds. One in law school, which everyone focused on getting the maximum return on benefits on their degree, and the corporate aspect of it, and one entirely different world I got at EECC and at Pune International Center, where we spoke about the problems we are facing, how to overcome them, about environment, about climate change, about the social dimensions of climate change, and that world which we don't really see in law school. So my chapter is an attempt to merge these two worlds that I was living simultaneously. So what I planned to do through writing this was essentially give a framework on first of all, how do our policies affect climate change? Because when we look at activism, when we look at many environmental movements, we largely discount the strength we have in our current institutions in the current infrastructure which is already there in the society, which will help us fight climate change, and how to best utilize that. So that is what I'm talking about in my chapter. So I am talking about what kind of infrastructure we currently have and how to make it more resilient to the changes which we are going to see due to climate change. And when I say infrastructure, I don't just mean physical infrastructure like buildings or public infrastructure, right, like roads. I mean intangible infrastructure, the skill sets people have, the policy structure we have, the grievance redressal mechanisms we have in place. All these institutions which are already there will help us go towards the change or towards net zero. So how to best use that in our journey for climate action. So that is what my chapter is about. And so me and Amitav sir, we were discussing a lot on what to name this book. And we both, Amitav sir felt that this was the best title because the picture is also very significant on the front page, I think, because it signifies development while still keeping in mind the ecosystem and the forest and the ecosystem we currently have. So I think it's...
Thanks to Gurdas for giving me.
Yes.
Thank you, Megha. I think that was quite relevant. The way you have integrated governance and democratic principles into the climate action is quite thoughtful of you. I would like to go to Shalvi. And Shalvi, I think one of the things which strikes me in your chapter is the use of the phrase convenient sustainability. She talks about something which is convenient sustainability. So a few words from you about your chapter.
Hi everyone, I'm Shalvi. So even I've worked with PIC for more than 2 years now. And right now I'm working with Oikos and Adhivas as a conservation and restoration, ecological conservation and restoration practitioner. And I'm enjoying this journey very well right now because this is something that has always been very close to my heart. And that's the reason why I thought I would write a chapter on a very specific topic, something that has come up because of the experiences, especially last year. Last year has been very dynamic when it comes to the issues, the environmental issues happening in Pune. So first, before I say anything about my chapter, thanks to Malik sir, Mashekar sir, the entire PIC team, and I'm honored to have had this opportunity to write a chapter with such amazing authors and experts. So my chapter, to simply put it into a few words, something that we were taught as children, all that glitters is not gold. So similarly, all that seems green is not really green. So this is the essence of the chapter. And this, so basically, like Gurdas sir mentioned, the word that I have used, that is something that I've seen, the convenient sustainability that I've seen in a lot of things that happen around us. When it comes to climate action, I think we are in a transition phase where we know that the climate action has to be done, but we don't know what exactly is going to be the result of that climate action. A lot of people misinterpret certain approaches to sustainability. They misuse those approaches. And that's where the greenwashing also comes up. A lot of companies do that. Governments do that. So last year, when I was involved in this movement of rivers and hills of Pune, and there were lots of things that people didn't know. So we had filed certain RTIs to understand what happened to those schemes and those initiatives that were, claimed by the government, that, okay, this is the project, this is the infrastructure project, and thousands of trees were transplanted to this or that region. And and then suddenly we think that, oh, we are moving towards a very green development. But nobody knows what happens to those plants, whether they were, monitored or not. So I think even tomorrow you're going to see, I'm sure you're going to see lots of green news in the newspaper. But it's very important to understand, to critically think about what is actually happening. Is that climate action really, bringing out that effect? And I think that's what actually is highlighted in my chapter. Just to give you one more example, because everyone is being promoting, afforestation, EVs. Of course, it has to be done, but it has to be done in the right way. So those approaches are covered in the chapter. For example, when we say we need to use EVs to reduce pollution, we don't think about the batteries that were made to run those EVs. Maybe those batteries are, extracted and processed in South America. This is a fact. So there's this one case study that I have covered in the chapter, where lithium extraction and processing is damaging the soil and water of indigenous communities that live in South America. So basically, we are just shifting the pollution from one place to another, from one form to another. And that is something that we need to think about. It's okay, maybe there's always trial and error in something, something new that we try to do in terms of science and technology. But we need to take that error elimination approach instead of the multiplier effect that is going on right now. The effect that is just multiplying, and we just think that something, the climate change is happening, but we really don't know how to monitor it, how to assess it. So I think that's very important. And I hope it gives a new perspective to the readers. And last thing, I think in the journey of activism, or just as a concerned citizen, wherever I have tried to contribute or understand the issues of Pune, I think the top-bottom approach is very crucial, because without the scientists, experts, and concerned citizens, all the things that we are talking about in the book, all the approaches to sustainable development are never going to happen in time, because there's a deadline that we have to follow because of climate change, because of global warming. And yes, so that's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Shalvi. That was interesting. The next author we have is an ecologist, Aditi. Aditi Kale has worked with PIC, and she is a zoologist herself, and she talks about ecology in a way that would make economists stand on their feet. So she's written a chapter on restoring ecosystems to drive sustainable development, and one of the things which we keep discussing in PIC is that ecological restoration is a very significant employment generator in this country. So let's hear the thoughts that Aditi has to share.
Thank you, Gurudas sir. Actually, I personally think my themes are very dark, because others are talking only about human suffering. I'm talking about all species. So I guess I'm competing only with Priya ma'am in this book, because she's talking about human suffering. But the thing about environment is that we cannot avoid it after one point, because our survival itself depends on it. And this is the link, or which we have forgotten. So the title of my chapter is about ecological ecosystem restoration in sustainable development. And basically I try to summarize the India's natural heritage, which is rich in terms of biodiversity as well as ecosystems. We all know the range right from Himalayas to Kerala to the islands. And secondly, these have their own problems and threats, which we need to address immediately. Just to give one fact, we have more than 46 types of ecoregions in the country, but the land under protection is just 5% of the total area. Second important challenge, because this year's theme is land degradation, just the scope of land degradation is 30% degradation in our country, which we need to restore by 2030, 2050, according to the agreements. So and the problem, what happens many times is restoration generally gets tagged as a economic policy or a a governance policy, but it does not get the right scientific approach, scientific attention, involvement of the local people in it. And these are the issues which I have tried to highlight in my chapter. And hope that you like it, and more hopefully that you agree with what I say, what we are trying to state in the book. And it is high time we involve environment and restoration in terms of conserving our ecosystems as well as improving the quality where they are degraded. So the priority still should be keeping the systems intact in the first place and not damaging them. But the second priority is optimally reviving them to their original form so that we enjoy the resources which we have been using from them. As Sir mentioned earlier, there's actually a study which shows that Western Ghats, which is like a biodiversity hotspot, which has like 325 threatened taxa in just one region, and it is already 90% degraded. And the second part is that the success of Konkan region and its business is also historically attributed to this region. So we cannot separate biodiversity and human success. And so that is the thought we need to go back to, according to me. Thank you.
Thanks, Aditi. Very nicely put. One of the shortcomings of ecologists is that there is very poor study on ecological impacts over time, which can really be thrust under the noses of policymakers, and that because they need hard evidence, they need quantitative data. Much of ecological evidence is qualitative in nature and not spread over time, and it also changes with the biogeography. So there are several challenges of getting these things into economic policy and with hard-nosed economists. So yeah, so Aditi's chapter is going to be there. So now we are left with two authors on the stage. One is a technologist who's going to talk on technology, and the other is a physicist who's going to talk on ethics and justice. And we'll start with the physicist first, Dr. Priyadarshini Karve.
Thanks, Gurudas. When Dr. Malik approached me for writing this chapter, I was very happy because as a physicist, I got into renewable energy, biomass energy, and then sort of got pulled into this black hole of how energy impacts people's lives, societies, and economies, and never escaped from there. So I have never done much of physics. After completing my PhD, I sort of got into these interdisciplinary areas. And it was by chance that I connected with a group that was looking at ethical issues around climate change in 1990s. When in India, people were not even talking about climate change as a relevant topic for discussing development. And these were people who had come from humanities background, so our interaction was quite interesting. And from that, we had been developing thought processes on the various dimensions of ethical issues associated with climate change. So this was a topic which was sort of, I had been acquiring information and thoughts about it, and this provided me the outlet to pen down all of this in a systematic way. Just to highlight some of the issues here, most of the discussion around climate change today, irrespective of where in the world you are, tends to focus on how are we going to reduce emissions and move towards carbon neutrality. And typically the framing of climate change sort of starts off like this, that since industrial revolution, humans started using coal and petroleum, and that is how we got into this mess. Now there are various problems with both the approach of prioritizing emission reductions all over the world and and framing it this way that this is some kind of a problem that all humans have created simultaneously. The Industrial Revolution happened in Europe. Coal and petroleum use first started in Europe. The right framing is that the European humans started using coal and petroleum and initiated this problem. Today, if we look at the cumulative greenhouse gases, additional greenhouse gases that have been put into the atmosphere by human activity, most of it has come from industrialized world. So it is a problem created by a handful of humans, but the impacts are global, and that is why we all have to somehow deal with it. The Kyoto Agreement in 1997 actually was based on this scientific understanding that there are these 37 industrialized nations who have contributed to this problem, and therefore they should solve it by dropping their carbon emissions. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. Climate change kept on happening, and therefore in 2015 in Paris Agreement, we had to say that since everybody is suffering, everybody has to put on the table action to reduce carbon emissions, which is actually unjust for the developing world. So there is that ethical problem there, that those who have created the problem are actually and continue to actually benefit from excessive use of coal and petroleum. And now this is no longer limited to some countries, but it is the developed sections of societies across the world who are using fossil fuels extensively and benefiting from that. So there is no incentive for them to reduce their emissions. The only argument that the rest of the world can make that, look, we are all one species, and if one section, one very large section of the species is suffering because of your actions, then it is your moral responsibility to reduce your emissions, which does not seem to be making any dent. And that's the core issue why, in spite of knowing about climate change, in spite of knowing about its impact since 1970s, not much has been done around it. The core issue is this, that those who are contributing to the problem don't seem to have any incentive to solve the problem. They are actually benefiting from continuing to create the problem. So we need to keep on bringing out these issues. Secondly, for a country like India, and that is where I felt that this book is very useful, that we are not talking about how to become carbon neutral country, etc., etc. We are talking about how to become climate resilient. That actually is a bigger priority for us, because we are one of the countries which are among the top 10 countries which are most vulnerable to climate change. Our cumulative contribution to greenhouse gas emissions till date is only 3%. Even though our annual contribution right now is high, the problems that the world is facing today, we have hardly contributed to it. And if you do the maths, you will realize that if the industrialized world does not become carbon neutral by 2050, it wouldn't matter whether China and India go carbon neutral or not. The world would already be doomed in any case, because both these countries' contribution to the cumulative emissions is very, very low. It is only if the industrialized world's emissions come down, then it becomes imperative that these two highly populous countries also become carbon neutral. So we have to stay on track for that, but our first priority for our citizens should be to ensure how to protect the Indians from the impacts of climate change, to which none of us, neither our ancestors, I mean all the people who feel very guilty here need not feel so, because you haven't really contributed to this problem. None of us have, and yet we have to deal with it. So that needs to be the priority of the governance system, how do we protect our own citizens? And then we will figure out how we contribute to the global effort of reducing carbon emissions. So climate resilience is an important or should be an important agenda. But unfortunately, if you look at all the climate action that is happening, whatever is happening is only because of the international pressures. And therefore, it is all mostly focused on trying to reduce emissions. Hardly anybody talks about how to build resilience, how to adapt to climate change. There are different impacts happening in different ecosystems. There are different vulnerabilities being faced by different communities. But none of that discourse is coming in the climate policy discussion. So these are the issues that we need to start highlighting. So one ethical issue is between developed and developing countries, but within India there is an ethical issue between the developed part of the society and the vulnerable communities. And then there is a third aspect of the ethical dilemma is, what about the next generations that are yet to be born? Or the very young people. We are spoiling their future by our actions. So how do we address that? So these various dimensions of ethical issues and vulnerabilities I have tried to highlight in this chapter. And really grateful to you, Dr. Malik, for giving me this opportunity and creating a place for the ethical issues to be discussed in a book about sustainable development. So thank you very much.
Thanks. Thank you very much. I think that's wonderful. The other thing is, you were talking about developed and developing countries. If we are able to use the polluter pays principle, we'll be able to pin down India's emissions a lot to the developed countries. So that's also, some of it is going to go there. I now invite Dr. Nitant Mate. He's a technologist and he's written a very good chapter. In fact, one of the highlights of the chapter I must mention here is that for every kind of electricity used, for example, lighting load, he has made flowcharts on what would be the pathway that we need to choose. Which of the we have a lot of options in renewable energy today, including nuclear, which is in there. So which pathway is best suited for lighting loads, which pathway is best suited for heating and cooling loads, so on and so forth. So that's a wonderful contribution by Nitant. Over to you, Nitant.
Thank you, Gurudas, and thanks to PIC and Professor Malik for giving this opportunity. Actually, I am a hardcore technologist. So only thing is, a mad technologist, because in 1987 when I went to do PhD in US, I wanted to work in renewable energy. I wanted to work in solar at that time. So nobody was even talking about that, but unfortunately I could not work in solar because there was no funding available. So the next best thing was working in materials. So I started with material science, doing PhD in mechanical engineering, but simultaneously started working on thin film solar cells. So in 1987 onwards, I have been in technology for renewable energy. And started with solar, and slowly as I started learning more and more about renewable energy and failing a lot in developing the technology and making a business out of it. I mean, I've failed miserably in doing business in renewable energy, but I think that has enriched me in terms of my thoughts. And what I realized is the only sustainable solution that we have is we have to find ways to harness sun. And that is the only solution that you can have which can be non-polluting, and ways and means of doing that. So whatever I have written in this chapter, all the technologies that you can think about, may it be solar photovoltaic, may it be solar thermal, could be bioenergy, could be hydro or wind, everything finally is harnessing sun. So we have to keep that in mind, and we have to also keep in mind that no matter what we do, if we have conversion of energy happening from one form to other, that means we are doing something which is inefficient, and we are also contributing in terms of carbon footprint by creating the equipment that converts the energy. So in the chapter, you will also see that I have tried to figure out numbers in terms of, suppose I have a biogas plant and I'm using that biogas plant for electricity generation. Then if the biogas plant has a life of say 15 to 25 years, then out of those 25 years or 15 years, what percentage of energy that I'm generating from the biogas plant actually should be given as a contribution to the embodied emissions that the biogas plant had when I built it. So that is most important thing. So for every type of energy, may it be solar photovoltaic, may it be solar thermal, biogas, wind, for all that, I have tried to give carbon payback in terms of the percentage of life of that technology. And then finally, as Gurudas put, we have so many options. Renewable energy is the only way to go, but renewable energy may not be 100% solution at this point in time. So we have to have hybrids. So it could be hybrid of solar photovoltaic plus grid. It could be hybrid of solar photovoltaic plus maybe biodiesel or biogas based generation and grid. Or maybe there are options where grid may not be used altogether at all. If it is heating solution, then you have to have different input going in. If it is electricity, then different input going in. If it is lighting, then different inputs are going in. And based on all that, you have to make the right choice in terms of what is my best option. So I have tried to create flowcharts as to kind of a guideline as to what should I do. If I have got this option, then what should be my first option, what should be my second option, what should be the third option. And I have tried to create, go, no-go kind of gates in there, and you try to, come up with the right kind of solution. So this is just an attempt. What I have to say that paradigm shift is required, and in that paradigm shift, energy use is one thing, of course, all right, but energy efficiency is something that we have to also look at. We have to first reduce the energy use, and then whatever energy we are using, we have to find out which is the best energy that we can, best form of energy that can be used for that. So all those thoughts have been put in the chapter. It's a very dry chapter because it's a very technical kind of thing, but I have tried to answer questions that I would have myself if I were to look at something like this, and tried to put it together in the chapter. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nitin. Last, coming to a little bit about what I have written at the Sustainable Green Growth for India. I have started with arguing that India needs growth. And the reason we need growth is very simple. We need to collect the taxes. We can no longer depend on World Bank and IMF and all the bodies who are supplying us with all the money for our development. We have to generate. It's a strategic source of funds for development which we must bolster. And that all depends upon the economic growth of the country. But what kind of economic growth is going on right now, and is this the way for the future, is what I have tried to argue. And I have taken out data from several sources. One is the International Resource Panel, which United Nations in 2007 put out. They keep updating the data on the resource consumption for economic growth of every country. The second is I've also looked at the Ministry of Mines and a lot of mining data. So the two key challenges which I talked about in this chapter are, if we are looking at growth, the significant challenge that we are going to have tomorrow is the depletion of non-renewable resources. And again, the International Resource Panel as well as the Ministry of Mines gives us a lot of data on the number of exhausted mines that are going up in the country. If you look at the strategic materials which are needed for renewable energy, which probably nobody talks about, out of the 15 strategic materials, critical minerals which are required for renewable energy, 10 of them are 100% imported for India. We don't have them, not at the moment, or we cannot extract them. So we are completely dependent upon other countries for giving us these materials. Now that's going to be a trouble for us, because in the international prices, in the international markets, as these prices raise, we are going to face trouble in switching in our transition to the renewable energy. The second is, the kind of look at, for example, simply look at phosphate. We have run out of phosphate, and our entire economy depends upon agriculture, and we have to import phosphate. We have to import rock phosphate. So these kind of minerals are getting depleted. We need to seriously look at that. The second part is what the industry economic engine feeds upon is renewable resources. Now we have significantly degraded our renewable resources. Look at the amount of pollution. No river in the country is safe for drinking water. The air is very toxic, like we keep reading, the kind of greenhouse gas emissions which are happening. The soil is getting polluted with over-fertilization and pesticide approach. So we are killing the biodiversity which is actually giving us the nutrition in the soil. And today, the microbiota is the biggest loser in India. So I've talked about the degradation that has happened to these renewable resources, but more importantly about land degradation. If you look at the latest 2021 report that SAC, Space Application Center, ISRO, has come up with, they published the Atlas of Land Degradation. India has about 380 million hectares of land, of which 92 million hectares of land are in degraded condition. And degraded condition means that it lacks the photosynthetic capacity. Now, we are in the tropical climate. We have to have flora. Flora is at the essence of that. When Ukraine and the Gulf countries and Alaska and Russia boast about crude oil stocks, we boast about the most renewable source of energy, which is sunlight, soil and rainfall. We have these which are very dependable. Now, the argument which I'm making is that when you're basing your economic growth upon non-renewable resources, we must increase the value add per use of the resource. Today we are lacking in that, and the classic example which Dr. Mashelkar always says about zirconium. We export our zirconium and import processed zirconium. So we need to get into these habits of increasing the value add per use of the resource. The second thing which we need to do is to use the resource more times than once, which is basically building circularity into that. We need a reallocation of the tax structure, the regimes, what have you today. So this is what I argue about non-renewable resource use. And for the renewable resource use, the biggest argument I have is that we must increase the value added from our renewable resource economy. And the bedrock of our renewable resource economy is agriculture. Right. And the poorest people in the country are the ones who are in the agricultural sector. So there we have a significant potential, not just to raise our economic growth, but also to alleviate poverty in that. And I have made a couple of suggestions in that. Thank you so much.
Thank you for such an enlightening discussion, and thank you, Gurudas sir, for guiding it. I would now request Dr. Ajit Ranade to share his thoughts on the future of sustainability.
Thank you, Sanika. We have released it. We are at 6:37, so maybe 5-7 minutes. Because once you give a mic to me, I get a little restless. So I want to first congratulate Dr. Malik and the 6 authors who are present here. So let me get their names right. Let me read them from here. So Shalvi Pawar, Megha Phadke, Dr. Karve, Dr. Nital, Aditi Kale, and Gurudas. So please, big round of applause for them. And of course, the one in absentia, Ijaz Ghani and Ajay Shankar. So anyway, congratulations. At the outset, I'd like to say it's a very scholarly book, by the way. Since nobody has mentioned it, I want to say that it's each article, each chapter has a lot of research and a lot of sort of in-depth analysis that's gone into it. So it's very, I've not read the whole book, but whatever I've read, it's very scholarly also. So it's a good, it's something of lasting value. So I want to say 5-6 bullet points. Please indulge me. I don't know if I'm going to say about future of sustainability, but number one, today is a World Environment Day, right? June 5. Then we have a Earth Day, April 22. Then we have a World Tree Day, which is November 21. We have a World Forest Day, which is March 21. Then we have World Water Day, March 22. So har din hai bhaiya. Bottom line is that every day is a World Environment Day. Okay. So please remember that. Second, I want to congratulate Dr. Karve in particular, but she's not here, yeah. But others also mentioned, because I think ultimately sustainable development is about things like what you said. You use these words. It's about basically morality. It's not very fashionable for economics. Pe hai hi nahi hai concept. No, it's a fact. It's a fact. Textbook. We are not supposed to talk about morality. But essentially, it's about morality. So these are issues of ethical, moral issues like fairness and justice. These are actually crucial, central to any discussion on sustainable development. So let's understand that. And so I know there are technologists here. Nitant is here. Then the great champion Gurudas will talk about so many million hectares and this and then sustainable but these are all uppercut dressing. The core issue is about ethics. Why do I say that? Because if the government spends more money than it takes in, we call it deficit, fiscal deficit. The government has an annual plan. It's 35% of the economy, by the way. So if it takes in more, if it spends more than it takes in, somebody is paying for it. That's called fiscal deficit. I hope everybody knows this word. So deficit financing is what? They borrow from the public. They don't print extra money, because if you just print more notes, demonetization ka opposite is monetization. वो जो करेंगे तो even more disaster. Like printing money and throwing it on the people just leads to inflation. So that's not what they do. They actually borrow money. But whom do they borrow it from? It's actually borrowing from taxpayer, you people, us people. But essentially it's borrowing from the future. Because this what they borrow, it has to be repaid. So essentially what Dr. Karve said, it's about the unborn generation. So what if you at some point if the deficit is too large, we say it's not sustainable. Ye nahi hoga. Imagine that if the government's budget revenue is 100 and its spending is 500 or 10,000. Ye nahi hoga na. So deficit every year around that budget time, and next July mein hone wala hai, is about 3% of GDP, 4%. We'll talk about that. Oh, great! Finance Minister has brought it down to 5.3%. So you have to think about why 5.3 is good and why 5.1 and it's not 7% or 10%. Because at some point you think about sustainability. If the deficit is too large, then you're borrowing from the future. So I want to, this is my second point. First point is about that it's an ethical issue. Second point, I would like all of you to popularize this notion that actually it is about theft. We are stealing from future generations. Those people are not born. They are not in this room. They don't have a voice. They can't speak because they're not born. But we are stealing from them. So big slogan, stop the theft. That's the way to put sustainable. The messaging should be stop the theft. Chori band karo. Ye chori hai, chori go. That's where it comes to moral and ethical issues. Everybody understands that theft is wrong, theft is bad, theft is immoral, theft is unethical. So please translate the language into saying stop the theft. Second point. Third point. Now this is a contrary point. Greenhouse gases. Do you know what is the greenhouse effect? Everybody sort of in their young minds and old minds thinks it's a bad thing. The greenhouse thing is a good thing. I hope all of you will know. Technologists will know that. What is greenhouse effect? Solar radiation comes to the earth, right? If we get exposed to all of it, we'll die. So therefore there's an atmosphere, and then there's the sort of surface re-radiates it back, and then the greenhouse gases, CO2 and all its cousins, they re-radiate it in all directions, and that's why they help maintain the temperature as livable and inhabitable. That's why life can sustain, whether it is, somebody was saying it, all ecology, not just human life, and it maintains it at stable. So it's a stable temperature, livable temperature. Maybe the range is, I don't know, in Iceland it is maybe 0 or minus 10 degrees. Yeah, basically human beings can survive. Now so the greenhouse gas, if we didn't have the greenhouse phenomenon, we will all die. It will either be too cold or too hot, you can't just survive. So the greenhouse thing is a good thing. So why are greenhouse gases the villains? Because it seems that there are too many greenhouse gases in the atmosphere and we are emitting them, then the heat will get trapped. So the radiation, that equilibrium will get upset. So there will be too excessive temperature, ज़्यादा बढ़ेगा. And then there are estimates that if the global sea temperature rises by 2 degrees, all kinds of bad things happen. So I just want to remind, so that greenhouse thing is a good thing, but we are just worried about this imbalance. Now there's a huge debate about this, so I'm not going to go into that. That some people feel that we are overreacting. But my point about Chori, that is not invalidated by this greenhouse thing, because if we didn't have CO2, plants will not survive. Plants ko chahiye CO2. So some people say if there is excessive CO2 in the atmosphere, it's good because plants will have higher yields, more photosynthesis hoga. For plants, CO2 is like life enriching. So it's just that how much of CO2 is good or bad. So that's a technical point. Fifth point. I have 2 more points. Incidentally, we talked about GDP. Somebody mentioned in the beginning itself, I think Dr. Malik. So you call it gross domestic product. So it's obviously something gross about it. So that's why it's called gross. So we need to have something better. It's too gross. So so therefore we need. But it's not a question of just defining. I think in your comments you said, can we define? Problems can't be solved just by changing the definitions. So on that I'll come. My last comment will be on that about measurement or definition की बात नहीं is more fundamental. So my second last point is, let me make sure I've covered the. My third last point. I have 3 points. So third last point is that when we talk about environment, really what issues we have, and Mr. Nulkar, this is for you. Actually, if you look at India, since we are talking about national boundaries and we have drawn these artificial lines in the sand, we call it Pakistan, India. ऐसा ज़माना था, Marco Polo के ज़माने में there was no such thing. You didn't need passport, visa, you traveled everywhere. But now we call it India, Pakistan, Sudan. So we worry about India's problems. So in India, the issue is about air and water quality. People can't drink water from a tap. People can't breathe the air because if you're in Delhi, traffic pollution. So it's not about CFC, it's not CO2, it's not ozone, it's not global warming. It's actually the issues here are, so there is a distinction between local environment issues or local versus global. So we can't talk about global warming and because I think it's too remote. So let's understand that at least for large sections of Indian society, the issue is about कि पीने को पानी नहीं है, drinking water. There's not enough drinking water, or waters and rivers are polluted, or the air is polluted, and it's a completely local thing. It's nothing to. I think it's not about. Largely it's not about the issues that the West discusses. So that dichotomy still continues. That really the solution for drinking water is not necessarily. I know we need to go to renewable energy and all that, but it's really it's like you need to stop the industries polluting the rivers. You need to have harsher control, police control of people dumping things. Second last point is the strong case for optimism. Okay, there's a technologist here. So all technologists say, my favorite way of describing is the following, that there are about 137 now elements in the periodic table. Is it latest count kya hai? 137, 136? It used to be 106 when I was a child. Then it became 110. Now maybe it's 136. Now, in how many ways sorry? Anybody know the answer to this? Okay. It's 136, let's say. So in how many ways can you combine elements like carbon, nitrogen, silicon, in how many ways can 136 elements be combined in 2 or 3 or 5 or 7, 10? What is the number?
136 into formula.
Thank you, Mr. Bhargav knows that 137C2 plus 137C3 plus and remove the duplicates. So it's a very, very big number. We are not even at 0.001% of that. The number of materials, who was the material science person of Mr. Moon? The amount of materials we have discovered, and even the fancy and magic material that Elon Musk keeps discovering. What is that? The carbon fiber mein then that single layer thing. Graphene. So that was the miracle material discovered in the last 10 years, maybe 15. But we have not even scratched the 0.1% of the potential of technological and scientific discoveries. So as a techno-optimist, we have to be really optimistic that we are going to solve problems through technology because There's a huge amount. The only limitation is human brain and our own imagination. So I think we have to, my way of describing it is, so long as I breathe, if I'm breathing, I got to be optimist. There's no choice. It's not a question. If you're alive, you have to be optimist. There's a very famous dialogue in a movie, which is, sorry, I'm going to take 2 more minutes. This movie, I think it's called, what is that, the Martin Luther King, when they cross the bridge. Is it Selma? One of his early episodes is where the blacks take a march in the civil rights movement to cross a bridge. He won an Oscar. So there's a black teenager and this white police officer, all kinds of brutalities. So he asks him out of compassion, यार हम लोग इतना आपको पीटते हैं, मारते हैं, torture करते हैं. How come you guys are still optimistic? He says, I'm breathing, ain't I? So long as I'm breathing, we got optimism. And they covered a lot in the civil rights movement. Anyway, now the last point I want to make is, we thankfully have a great inspiring person for thinking about environment, sustainability, sustainable growth, equity, efficiency, justice, fairness, is one Mr. Gandhi. So I'm just going to quote his sayings and aphorisms are quite well known. Some of them people say they're not really somebody else said it. वो बोलते हैं अरे पुल्ला नहीं सांगितलं होतं, WhatsApp में था. It turns out it पुल्ला देशपांडे नहीं था, कोई और पुल्ला. So but anyway, these are useful ones. We should attribute to Gandhi. Number 1, be the change you want to see. Whatever change we want, we have to be the change. So Mr. Nulkar is driving a campaign where the school kids are say no to plastic water bottles, no to plastic lunch boxes, no to plastic covers for their notebooks and textbooks. So they are being the change that we want to see. So number 1 is be the change in our own lives. अभी का एक नया आया कि इस्त्री ना क्या करूँ कपड़े ना. So be the change you want to see. I think it starts with an individual person. Second, the world has enough for everybody's need, but not everybody's greed. So this is a very nice, simple way of saying what is sustainable development. Of course, you'll say, how do we define kiska greed, kiska need? And the way our polity is going, we keep on expanding the definition of needs. Pehle it used to be roti kapda makan, then it's a mobile, then what? Now a grinder, mixer, then saris, maybe television set. So the need definition, it's simple. It's a very simple way of capturing what we want to say. The world has enough for everybody's need, but not everybody's greed. And it's not so difficult to define the distinction between need and greed. So on that note, I'll thank you, and again, congratulations to the author.
Thank you, Ajit sir. Can I please request Dr. Mashirkar to share his thoughts?
So, Dr. Ajit Ranade, Dr. Amitabh Malik, and all distinguished authors of this wonderful book, ladies and gentlemen. We must pass a law. Never speak after Dr. Ajit Ranade. It was an incredible talk, very, very inspiring as usual, very, very insightful. And the worst thing is that from what I have written, how much of it has been covered by you. Our English will be different, messages will be the same. Because I agree with all your messages done in the Ajit Ranade fashion. I think, first of all, I want to thank Amita. Without you, we will not be here. Without you, this book will not be. You have been the inspiration. You started as early as 2012, you remember? 12 years ago, this entire energy, environment, climate change initiative, we created path-breaking reports under your guidance, including for our PMR, making it carbon neutral and so on and so forth, etc. So, my profound thanks. The second is congratulations to all individual authors. You may not be sort of aware of the kind of schedules that I run, but during those schedules, I can assure you, I've gone through this entire book because of a very selfish reason, to be able to learn from that book, very frankly. And it is so rich. You rightly said, it has been well researched, because I also, people think that I know everything, so I get called on to speak on everything. So I read a lot. And from that, I have my own database. And it becomes very easy to compare what you know. And a lot of it is what I did not know. It was much ahead of it. So I want to congratulate each one of them. The World Environment Day, its importance is obvious. There have been skeptics like Donald Trump about climate change. I wish he was in Delhi when the temperature was 52.3 degrees centigrade and we created a world record. I mean, for India, it was the highest. I went through the data and found that there were some temperatures which are higher, up to 58, by the way. Yeah. So, but that was the highest, actually. So what happens is that you feel the impact of climate change. There only you realize how bad it is going to be. See, for example, when you read a news like the Australian bush fires which took place in 2019-20, and you hear 18 million hectares were destroyed. You read that. Doesn't make sense to you. You find 3,000 houses were destroyed, 3 billion animals got affected, or 400 megatons of carbon dioxide. That's huge. Was generated. You read it and forget about it. But once you start sensing water scarcity or the high temperatures during the, I think our election was held when the heat waves were on, and I must pay salute to those who voted, salute to those who worked, and some of them, as you know, lost their lives, as a matter of fact. So we start sensing it now, so as to say, so it is so important. I like what President Obama had said. We are the first generation to feel the effect of climate change and the last generation who can do something about it. So there is a responsibility. And then coming back to what you said, as I said, my English will be different than yours. Greta Thunberg had said that young activists, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors, we borrow it from our children. Same message, put differently. Because we are stealing from them, right? That's the point we want to make. And therefore, Amitabh, I must congratulate you, because you have dedicated this book to the right people, to the next generation. And I read out, it says the book is dedicated to the youth of India and world over whose future is in danger. You're absolutely right. So I want to reinforce that particular point about thieving. That's not done. That's not morality, that's not ethics. The other point, the word ethics, morality kept on coming again and again. So while I was putting down my notes in the morning, I went back to year 2000. When the Indian Science Congress, I was the president, and I had given a new Panchasheel for the new millennium, 5 points. And there I had talked about child-centered education, woman-centered family, human-centered development, knowledge-centered society, and innovation-centered India. These were the 5 points. And in the human-centered development, and I just wrote it down, I had said that we cannot have plans of economic development where the human is a bystander. In the new human-centered development, 5 E's, namely ecology, and you talked about it, environment, that's what we are talking about, economics, that's what we are talking about, equity and ethics will have to be balanced. This was year 2000. And that's what we are talking about. This is what this book is all about. Just now, Gurudas, we have written a brilliant chapter, Sustainable Green Growth for India. Green growth, it's like when I say affordable excellence. People say, hey, come on, what is affordable can't be excellent, what is excellent cannot be affordable. And then you show that India has done it. Green growth, what is growth can't be green, what is green cannot be growth. That's wrong. And I think that is the center point we bring out in this book. I think it comes in many different ways. So I love it, this environment and economics connection. But in those 5 years, equity and ethics also we talked about. Ethics has many dimensions. Ethics is our moral responsibility to our people. For example, Ajit, this transition that we talk about, we start using the word just. That must be right, right? You want to close down thermal power plants. Fine, we have to, because coal has to go out. But what about the people who have primary, secondary, tertiary jobs? What about their skills, which are so limited, and the time for that particular sort of expansion? And therefore, that ethical part becomes important. The other ethical part, and I loved this chapter, last chapter on ethics of climate change and climate justice priorities, Priyadarshini, yours. But I give sort of bigger definition of that. One of that ethics part is the following. You rightly pointed about developed world, what they have done, etc. They are responsible, and we are not responsible, etc., etc. But there is what is called as a moral authority of some sense. I think we have to be aware of that. But as an 82-year-old man, I have seen a lot. One of that was Montreal Protocol. You talked about ozone layer depletion, if you talk about, because ozone protects us, like what you said. Chlorofluorocarbons, we have to get rid of them. Okay? And for that, the technologies that were to be made available, there was a Montreal Protocol where the developed world said we'll give it. Did they give it? No. I remember I was the Director General of CSIR, and in my Indian Institute of Chemical Technology, we started a program on HFSC 134A. That was the substitute by the. It took us 8 years because it was a very complicated technology. The DuPonts of this world did not give it. So I think there is a moral and ethical dilemma in terms of access to technology, and lots of discussions have taken place, but actually you do not see action somehow or the other. And in the financing chapter, for example, which has been written here, I would very much like to see these nuances, because DuPont, if they have spent money on that, they will not make the technology available. So what kind of fund that you can create, where there is a global kitty, and how you give access to it, because everything is not going to be open access, very frankly. We have to understand that they have spent money, etc. And we talk about Atmanirbhar Bharat, it takes time. Like I said, it took me 8 years from lab level work to pilot plant to semi-commercial to commercial. Basically, you have to go in steps. That is one part. The other part is that I am a great believer in pole vaulting. All of you know, leapfrogging to pole vaulting, moving rapidly, speed, scale, sustainability, etc. But there are limits one has to understand. I was the chairman of the National Auto Fuel Policy, which set up the standards for Euro 1, Euro 2, Euro 3, Euro 4, that particular journey, which became the BS, biostandards. And I remember the Center for Science Environment and others, NGOs, they wanted to snap their finger and say, we want it tomorrow. But my advantage is that I'm an engineer. I know what can be done, what cannot be done. And therefore, I remember going to the oil industry, asking them, from 500 parts per million to 50 parts per million sulfur, you require desulfurization, hydrodesulfurization. How much money will it cost? How much time it will take? You can't snap your finger and create that. Otherwise, you have to import. Did we have foreign exchange to import? No. So it takes time. I remember going to auto companies and asking them to get into Euro 4 level engines, how much time it will take. Development takes time. And based on that, we laid out the roadmap. Okay. And I was severely attacked. They said I was sold to oil companies, I was sold to auto companies. In fact, for 6 continuous days, Times of India carried me on the front page. And they wouldn't say Mashelkar committee, they would say Mashelkar. And on the 7th day, they put my photograph, Ajit, inside and said the most harassed man of the week. Finally, what they had considered as something my going slow, even though those timetables that we were given, the government of India could not meet. It took 1.5 years more than what we had said, but nobody wrote about it later. I think the main point I want to make is that we have to understand transition, a just transition, and in terms of access to money, to time, to people, the talent, and technology, what it takes, as a matter of fact. I think that's very, very important. Pole vaulting I love. For example, we moved from Euro 4 level to Euro 6. We jumped, we skipped Euro 5. But we gave enough time to industry in the meantime. I think that's an important point that somewhere or the other has to figure in the book in terms of technology and policy, government policy going together. So that is one suggestion, because we will have second edition. This is going to be very, very worthwhile. The other point I want to make is about the technology. And we had a wonderful discussion. Fortunately, I came early and we could spend a lot of time. You know, the discussion was triggered based on Nital's chapter on role of technology. Technology advances are taking place, and we have to look at how these technology advances can be used, because digitalization, decentralization, and decarbonization, these are three things that are going to happen. So for decarbonization, for example, what technology? And it is amazing, even AI can play a role, artificial intelligence can play a role, as has been sort of covered in the book, etc. Now, here, there was an interesting thought that came up, because I was in Mumbai on the other day, felicitating Professor J.B. Joshi, was my colleague who reached 75 years, a great chemical engineer. And Anil Kakodkar and I were sitting together during his felicitation. And Anil and I were discussing about carbon being the villain. Can carbon be made a hero? So I told him, look, I remember when it comes to materials, Ajit, we started with the Stone Age, then went to Bronze Age and Silicon Age and so on and so forth. And I remember a lot of lectures I had given where I had said this is going to be age of advanced carbons. Okay? The breakthroughs started coming. Graphene is what you mentioned. Carbon nanotubes, fullerenes, and so on and so forth. Okay? Now can we start looking at them rather than sequestering carbon dioxide, storing it somewhere deep, etc., etc. Can we convert it into something which is not only value add in terms of the enterprise which is developed, but from environment point of view also. We started discussing that. And it's very interesting. Professor J.B. Joshi has developed carbon nanotube based, you know, normally the jackets that are bulletproof are made of what is called as Kevlar. All right? And these are aromatic polytheramides, basically, and they are very expensive. Okay? For our army, we require something that is cheaper but equally bulletproof. And he created, based on carbon nanotubes, a technology which is almost 1/100 in terms of the cost. 1/100, not even 1/10. And out of which they have now made what are called as Bhabha Kavach, and they are going to armies, and they are going to be exported. Can you just understand what I'm trying to say in terms of looking at carbon as a villain to something that carbon that protects and that creates a competitive advantage for us. As we speak in National Chemical Laboratory, Ashish Lele is working, his team is working on converting that villain carbon into artificial diamonds, industrial diamonds. Can you just imagine the kind of value add? But the point is, we have megatons of carbon dioxide. Small amounts will not do of what I can't do. So the question that one asks is that these materials like graphene, for example, they are both functional as well as structural applications. Functional applications take very little volume, right? Like silicon, it goes in very small volumes. But structural take big volumes, and we require big volumes. So the question that I asked is, what is the big volume application that you can have? And I went to ChatGPT. This is not my knowledge. And asked a simple question. And the question was about what we can do in terms of large volume. Construction materials is the obvious answer. That is the largest volume. We'll keep on constructing as long as we live. And here is the answer. Carbon pure concrete, for example. There is a carbon pure technology that injects recycled carbon dioxide into wet concrete mix, where it chemically converts to calcium carbonate, making the concrete stronger and reducing the amount of cement needed. Carbon dioxide based aggregates, there is a Blue Planet company which uses carbon dioxide to create synthetic limestone aggregates, and they are used. Carbon dioxide cured concrete blocks. So the Solidia Technologies produces concrete blocks and other precast products. By curing them with carbon dioxide instead of water, the process is really lower carbon dioxide emissions. Mineral carbonation for building materials. There is a company which involves reacting carbon dioxide with industrial waste materials such as steel slag and so on and so forth. And I can keep on reading. There are a large number of applications. I think the main point that I'm trying to make is converting an adversity into an opportunity. Not looking at carbon as a villain, but carbon as a friend from which, and I gave you some examples just now, and there are sort of many more. So what it requires, Ajit, is this, basically. Can we do that? That is one point I wanted to make. And the last point I want to make is about PIC, Pune International Center. What we are trying to do, what we have done today is part of a sort of big game that we have. And there are many other things that are sort of happening. I especially like to mention about the great work you are doing, Dina, in terms of water security or Project Jalamulya. And you got everybody together, PCMC, NGOs, and actually now we are going to create an evidence-based sort of policy for a rational water tariff, promoting fairness of equity, efficiency, etc., etc., etc. But most important was that you got dozens of stakeholders together. And this is what we could do in Pune. So as soon as Pune International Center publishes a book, Amitabh, I ask myself, as a Punekar, what is it that Pune can do? And therefore, when the second edition comes, I like to see a separate chapter on what Pune can do, but what is Pune doing. For example, look at policy. Ajit, you, on my 80th birthday, you took me to the institute. To do what? To inaugurate the Sustainable Development Center. That was the most, yes, and Gurdas, you have brought it to such a great level. So we have a solid policy think tank there. Amitabh, you have created that, and sort of there are others. So at a policy level, at a thinking level, we have. But at action level also, we have a lot in Pune. For example, if you look at fuel cells, hydrogen fuel cells, for example, you look at the New Millennium Indian Technology Leadership Initiative, KPIT and NCL working together. They have created hydrogen fuel cells, basically, which are ahead of the rest of the world. Cost competitive as well as performance competitive. We launched the bus in December 2021. And on 22nd February, which was our Science Day, our Prime Minister in Cochin shipyard launched a ferry which would run on hydrogen fuel cell. And this is a part of the Harit Nauka project. What does it mean? What does it mean? It means all waterways actually can be run on that fuel cell. Completely indigenous, all right. Cost competitive vis-a-vis the rest of the world, performance competitive vis-a-vis the rest of the world, all right. And they are now moving on sort of scaling. Something that Pune has done can transform the waterways and make them green. I think that should be our vision. In terms of what we do here, impacts the whole world. Pramod Chaudhary, for example, biofuels. In 100 nations, he has a sort of a footprint. Pune. We have been able to sort of do that. We talked about alternatives. I think your chapter covers it very well. You are given all those elements, and lithium is at the top. You're right, actually. Your analysis is absolutely right. Tomorrow, what happens if China says, thank you very much? So we have a challenge. And of course, we have discovered something in Jammu Kashmir and all that, but that will take years, basically. So we have to be realistic. So how do we protect ourselves? It was the vision of somebody like Ravi Pandit, who went into sodium-ion batteries. And it is at TRL 7, 8 now, not TRL 9. And that is where the government has to come in. You know, they have announced 1 lakh crore and the same government continues. So I hope the same philosophy and policy will continue. They have announced 1 lakh crore to support, let us say, the critical technologies. That should come in and to help sort of take it forward. We can be the leaders. I mean, that's... and as luck would have it, I'm very proud that tomorrow I will be inaugurating a pilot plant of a startup in our venture center. It is called Rechargeon, and actually they have created rechargeable sodium-ion batteries with performance which matches sort of the best, and they have a proprietary technology, that as well as lithium sulfur, not just lithium sodium, but lithium sulfur. So our startups are doing it here. Our big enterprises like KPIT are doing here. The projects of this world are doing sort of this thing. And then we have this program where actually we'll be having the Pune Hydrogen Valley. 11 partners, industry partners. Just last week, the government has released this idea of Hydrogen Valley budgets, 200 crore for 4 centers. And there again, what happens is that you can create hydrogen, but what the hell do you do with it? So they have created 4 centers. In Kerala, they will look at marine applications. In Bhubaneswar, they will look at applications related to steel, and Jodhpur related to ice engines. And as far as we are concerned, we are looking at fine chemicals, because fine chemicals is a multi-billion-dollar industry. Okay, and for reduction, you can start using hydrogen. And in Kurkum, we have a big concentration of these. So here, generation, storage, exploitation, 11 industry people coming up, great public-private partnership with PKC, Pune Knowledge Center. I think they, cluster, they and Ashish Lele, they created it. The beauty of it is 125 crore project, government only putting 50 crore, the rest coming from industry. Otherwise, our ratios are actually reversed. And I can keep on talking about, for the rest of the evening, about what Pune can do, has done in terms of technology and policy. So my request to you is that when the second book, entirely published by Pune International Center comes, I would like to sing a song for what Pune has done, because this is not sung across the country. I think we need to sing. If nobody else sings, we'll sing it. All right? And that's very, very sort of important. I like to end with a nice quote, which is scary. The future will either be green or not at all. There's an extreme. And I think that's the future we are talking about. And this is our important contribution to that, important contribution by all of you. So I salute you and thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Mashirkar sir. I request, as we come to a close of the evening, I request our PIC director, Shri Abhay Vaidya, to please make some remarks.
Thank you very much, Sanika. Sir, this has been such a fascinating evening with so much of learning and such deep insights that all of you have shared with us. The only thing I wish to say is that this is a landmark event for us at PIC because this is the first self-published book of PIC. And it is available in hardbound, it is available in paperback. Professor Malik has already begun work on bringing out the Marathi edition of this book. And the translator has been identified and the work is progressing on that. The second reason why this is a landmark event is because it reflects the philosophy and one of the core objectives of PIC, which is working with young people. And Professor Malik, you have set an example at PIC by carrying what Megha Phadke said and what others said, by giving an opportunity to our young scholars who are going to be the leaders of tomorrow. And this is what PIC has been doing in all of its research verticals. And Professor Malik, you have been so passionate and committed to the work that you've done at PIC that it's truly commendable. At the beginning itself, you mentioned the interactions that you had with Dr. Kelkar, and really we miss Dr. Kelkar at this event. He's in Bangalore. But week after week, Professor Malik and Dr. Kelkar would have interactions at our weekly meeting where the progress on this book would be discussed. The panel discussion, Dr. Nulkar, was so interesting and insightful that it has evoked so much of curiosity that I'm sure that everyone in the audience wants to read every chapter line by line. And on that note, I must mention that the book is available outside at 20% discount. It will also be available to PIC members from our bookseller. So I wish to, of course, thank Dr. Mashelkar and Dr. Ranade for their thoughts which they have shared with us, their warm words of appreciation. And I want to thank Sanika Potnis for coordinating this event, for anchoring this event, Geeta Hosmane and her team for all the back-end work. Before I close, I would like to mention our forthcoming events. So on Thursday, June 13th, we have a lecture on India after elections 2024 by Professor Suhas Palshikar, one of India's leading political scientists, in this very auditorium, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. On 15th June, Saturday, we have Pandit Dr. Arun Dravid, a highly accomplished vocalist of the Jaipur Atrauli Gharana, who will be speaking on science and music. So the event will be chaired by Professor Apte, and it will be held again at this very venue. So with this, I would like to thank all of you for your presence here. The one thing that was missing because of paucity of time was a Q&A session. So when we have the next edition of the book and in future events, I'm sure we'll have that. So with this, I would like to thank all of you for your presence here today. Thank you very much.